In Norse mythology, Thor, Loki, and Odin are the most famous and powerful trio. Known for their legendary stories and moments, they've always been depicted in media as a force to be reckoned with. Leave it to Konami to not make this the case in Yu-Gi-Oh! Introduced in the 5D anime and given a hype set properly named Storm of Ragnarok, the Nordic/Aesir archetype was expected to overtake the TCG and compete with the best in the format. From weak effects to head-scratching conditions to support not really meshing well. We'll be talking about all the reasons why the Nordics had a Viking's death in the TCG. We'll start with the Nordic beast that lead to Thor. Tanngrostur of the Nordic beast was a level 3 earth beast with 800 attack and 1100 defense. When a monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is changed from defense position to attack position, you can special summon a Nordic monster from your deck in face-up defense position. Goldfax of the Nordic beast was a light level 4 tuner with 1600 attack and 1000 defense. And when your opponent controls a synchro monster and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Garmir of the Nordic beast was a dark level 4 with 800 attack and 1900 defense. When Garmir battles a level 4 lower monster, after damage calculation, you can return that opponent's monster to the hand. And finally, Tanngrostur the Nordic beast was level 3 with 1200 attack and defense that would spawn 2 level 3 Nordic beast tokens when it was destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Nothing in the Nordic beast stood out to be good. Most of the monsters were battle-oriented, needing to be either destroyed by battle or other cards needing to destroy them by battle to get their effects. They also didn't have any extensions, with their only extension being Goldfax, who had a terrible Cyber Dragon-esque effect, needing your opponent to control a synchro monster to be able to special summon it. So, we know the Nordic beasts weren't carrying the deck, but what about the other two sub-archetypes? Moving on to the Nordic alfars, Yulsof of the Nordic alfar was a light level 4 spellcaster with 1400 attack and 1200 defense. When normal summoned, you can target a face-up monster you control, except this card, and special summon a Nordic monster from your hand with a level less than or equal to the face-up's level. Svaltorf was a dark level 5 tuner with 1400 attack and 1600 defense. That lets you target a Nordic monster from your graveyard and add it to your hand when it's normal summoned. Finally, Dverg was a level 1 Earth Warrior with 100 attack and 1000 defense that gives you an additional normal summon of a Nordic monster when you normal summon it. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a Nordic relic card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. While the Alfars were barely put together as a sub-archetype, they synergized better than the Nordic beasts. Dverg and Svaltar were the best 1-2 combo, with you being able to play Dverg, fetch a second normal summon in order to tribute for Dverg to Staltrof to grab a Nordic relic from your grave in the process. However, they also suffered from a lack of extenders and special summons they needed in order to summon their high-level synchros. However, the Nordic Ascendants didn't have this problem, as they had a starter that could instantly make the All-Father in one turn. Well, sort of.
We're going to freeze to death unless we call for help. How does your phone look?
My phone has just enough power to sign up for HelloFresh. I saw they can help you get better at cooking by giving you step-by-step recipes along with the exact portions you need, so you can't possibly get things wrong even if you're a beginner.
Thank goodness you have internet. Quick call for help.
Oh, no can do. I'm too busy thinking about HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, including 20-minute recipes designed to minimize stress and maximize the time spent savoring your supper.
We are going to freeze to death. We don't have time to look at subscription food services.
HelloFresh allows you to choose from 30+ calorie smart or protein smart recipes each week. Packed with fresh ingredients, everything arrives pre-portioned and right at your doorstep for less hassle and more And the best part? When you try HelloFresh, you unlock free dessert for life. That's right, satisfy your sweet tooth with a decadent sweet dessert item in every box as long as your subscription is active.
Wait, really? How exactly does that desert thing work?
Just sign up with me and we'll find out together. We're ghosts, we can't die anyway. Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Go to HelloFresh/TheDuelLogs and use my code DuelLogsMay10 and receive 10 free meals plus free desserts for life while the subscription is active. Valkyrie the Nordic Ascendant was a level 2 light fairy tuner monster. When it's normal summoned, if your opponent controls a monster and you control no other monsters, you can banish 2 Nordic monsters from your hand in order to special summon 2 level 4 Ironheart Jar tokens in defense position. Mimir was a level 2 Dark Fairy monster that, once per turn during your standby phase, would allow you to send a spell card from your hand to the graveyard to special summon it from the graveyard if you control a Nordic monster. Vanadis was a level 4 Dark Fairy tuner monster that could be used as a substitute for any Nordic tuner for a synchro summon. But if this card is used as synchro material, the rest of the monsters must be Nordic monsters. Once per turn, you can send a Nordic monster from your deck to the graveyard to make this card's level become that set monster's level until the end of the turn. Finally, though not an Ascendant, Tyr, the Nordic champion, was a level 4 warrior monster which prevented your Nordic monsters from being targeted by attacks. But if there's no other Nordic monster in the field, destroy this card. Vanadis is one of the better highlights for the Nordic archetype, as it was the only tuner you could use for all 3 Nordic gods. Valkyrie would be the MVP for the Ascendants at least. Though it took your opponent controlling a monster for its effect to be live, it was the quickest way to summon Odin, as the card was able to summon the Father of the Aesir himself, all by himself with the tokens that it spawned. The main issue all three of them had was they had no cohesion with one another outside of their names being Nordic. Their effects also relied heavily on normal summoning and barely having little to no extenders to be able to pop out their respective synchros. If it weren't for Vanadis being able to treat itself as any Nordic tuner, the deck probably would have been even more unplayable. Decks with multiple sub-archetypes usually don't do well due to engines clashing and combos requiring specific pieces to function as a deck. If you think that's disappointing, wait until you see what the Nordic gods do. Thor, Loki, and Odin were all level 10 synchro monsters. Thor required a Nordic beast tuner plus 2 or more non-tuner monsters. Once per turn, you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls currently. During the end phase, if this face-up card you controlled is destroyed by your opponent's card by battle or effect and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a Nordic beast monster from your grave to special summon this card from the graveyard and inflict 800 damage to your opponent. Loki required a Nordic alfar tuner plus 2 or more non-tuners. Once per turn, you can negate the activation of a spell or trap card during your battle phase. During the end phase, if this face-up card you control is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a Nordic alfar monster from your graveyard to special summon it back and add a trap card from your graveyard to your hand. Odin took a Nordic Ascendant tuner plus 2 or more non-tuners, and once per turn, you can make it unaffected by spell and trap cards until the end of the turn. During the end phase, if it was destroyed in your possession by your opponent and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a Nordic Ascendant monster in your graveyard to special summon it back and draw a card. For the amount of material and requirements it took to make these monsters, the effects were truly lackluster. Level 10 synchro monsters weren't vast in the TCG then, but they usually came with powerful game-changing effects if you could make them. However, these effects weren't worth the materials used to make them. Between an effect that turned off effects for current cards on the field, a spell and trap card negate during the battle phase only, and immunity that you have to activate manually, these just made Nordics not worth it to summon, even with their ability to revive themselves. It's not like they were invulnerable on summon either. A quick bottomless trap hole or compulse would make quick work of keeping Ragnarok from happening. What's even more grievous is that their revival effects didn't do anything if they were banished. So you were probably thinking maybe the spell and trap cards kept them upright. Well, that wasn't really the case either. Nordics had 4 spell cards to work with alongside 8 traps. For spells, we start with the field spell Nordic Lights, which prevented all Nordic monsters from being destroyed by battle, but destroyed all Nordics on the field when it's destroyed. Nordic Relic Drumpier was an equipped spell which could only be equipped to a Nordic or Aesir monster. The monster gains 800 attack, and when a card effect destroys this card, you can add a Nordic Relic card from your deck to your hand. March Towards Ragnarok is next. It's a quick play spell that targets an Aesir monster you control and negates its effects. In return, that monster is unaffected by spell and trap cards until the end of the turn. Finally, God of Damarung was a normal spell card that lets you target an Aesir monster you control and give it to your opponent. During your opponent's next end phase, destroy that monster and banish all cards your opponent controls. The spells were on the wonky side of the Nordic/Aesir support, making it hard to justify running. Nordic Lights was a legit 1 MST away from emptying your field. Dranpanir was a conditional searcher that needed to be equipped just to get popped for you to try to search your only Nordic relics. March Towards Ragnarok made your Aesir monsters only useful in the battle phase at best due to its protection, but it negated your Nordic gods' effects. And God of Damarung was a gimmick board wipe that probably wouldn't last long on the field. Outside of the occasional use of March Towards Ragnarok, none of these cards warranted any play in the deck. The traps also lived up to the statement except for one of them. Gleipnir, the Fetters of Fenrir, was a trap card that added 1 Nordic monster from your deck to your hand. Nordic Relic Meganjord lets you target an Aesir or a Nordic monster you control and doubles attack and defense until the end of the turn, but it can't attack your opponent directly. Divine Relic Mjolnir targets 1 Aesir monster you control to give it the ability to attack a second time during the battle phase this turn. Solemn Authority was a continuous trap that targets an Aesir monster and makes it untargetable by card effects while this card is on the field, but destroys this card during your second standby phase after activation. Nordic Relic Brisengamen targets 1 face-up monster you control and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and makes the attack of the first target equal to the attack of the second target until the end of the turn. Nordic Relic Levitine targets 1 face-up monster in the field that destroyed a monster by battle this turn and destroys it. Cards and effects can't be activated in response to this card. The Golden Apples gives you life points equal to the battle damage you took while controlling no monsters, and if you do, special summon a Malice token. Its attack and defense is equal to the battle damage you took. Nordic Relic Gungnir banishes a Nordic or Aesir monster to target 1 card in the field and destroy it, and brings the monster you banished back to your side of the field during the second standby phase after activation in face-up attack position. To round it all off, Odin's Eye was a continuous trap that lets you target 1 Aesir monster once per turn during the standby phase, negate its effects until the end of the turn. If you do, you get to look at your opponent's hand and set cards, and your opponent can't activate cards or effects in response to this effect's activation. The main issue with Nordics continued with their spell and trap cards. Incohesive effects, super conditional requirements to activate the cards, and effects that didn't warrant play were the main suspect that made Nordics nothing more than a pile of cards. It's sad to see that the only card that consistently saw play from the plethora of trap cards was Gleipnir, and it was barely a good searcher because it was on a trap card. The other cards were really seen as terrible because they either required you to target a certain monster you control and either banish it or negate the effect of the monster you control to meet the requirements, leaving you with either just a crappy beatstick or a vulnerable field. So, for their debut in the TCG, these Norse Legends archetypes had little to no synergy, issues making their synchros, wonky spells and traps, boss monsters with mediocre effects, and one of the worst solemns ever to be printed. So when anyone says the deck made no impact and just took up pack space, you now understand why. On May 10th, 2011, Konami introduced the newest TCG set, Extreme Victory. Though Nordic/Aesir didn't receive an Extreme Victory with this next card, it was a slight win with the introduction of Mara the Nordic Alfar, a level 2 Dark Tuner that could only be used as a synchro material alongside 2 Nordic monsters from your hand. There are a couple of pros and cons with this card. The upside is you don't risk putting your synchro materials on the field to get blown up. You could also synchro now with just having Mara on the field and could easily bring out Loki. The downside was this was only good for the Nordic Alfars and Loki, meaning using it for any other Nordic god was out of the question, since they needed either a Nordic Beast or an Ascendant Tuner to be synchro summoned. So the support made players favor Loki builds more due to Mara's ability. It also didn't fix the fact that the deck still lacked extenders, good surge power, and synergy to be playable on a casual or competitive field. On October 24th, 2014, Konami continued its Nordic support in Legendary Collection 5Ds, and also made sure the support was abysmal. Fenrir the Nordic Wolf was a level 10 Dark Beast with 4,000 attack and defense. It can't be normal summoned or set, and can be special summoned in defense position during the main phase 2, from your hand to your opponent's field if there's an Aesir monster on your side of the field. If there's no Aesir monster, destroy this card. At the start of the battle phase, change all defense position monsters you control to face up attack position, and both players take any battle damage from attacks involving this card. Jormungandr the Nordic Serpent was a level 8 Dark Dragon with 3,000 attack and defense. Like Nordic Wolf, it can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned in the same way as well. If this face-up defense position card is changed to attack position, take 3,000 damage. This effect can only be used once while it's face-up on the field. If the effect seems terrible, that's because they're supposed to be, as you'd want to make your Aesir synchro monster and then special summon these cards to your opponent's field to combo with each of them using Fenrir to change Jormungandr to attack position, and then burn your opponent for 3,000 with Jormungandr's effect. The only issue is that the monsters need an Aesir monster on the field, which took time due to how slowly Nordics would make their synchros. The combo didn't seem any good either. Jormungandr's effect could only be used once while it's face up, and essentially it just gave your opponent a 4,000 attack and 3,000 attack beatstick, which was more than enough to take down almost any monster you controlled and easily get these Nordic calamities off the field. Nordics at this time was already considered a bust, too slow to keep up with the meta. Unable to even establish a board, let alone its boss monsters, what chance did it have at being a successful archetype? At this point, the only way for Nordics to work is to make a card that can turbo its material, which they did do during the Link format. In the Legendary Hero deck, Nordics were given a Link 1 in Guildford of the Nordic Ascendant. This Link 1 requires just one level 5 or lower Nordic monster to be made. When it's Link summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards from your hand and or field to special summon Nordic monsters from your deck in defense position up to the number of cards you banish with the effect. But then you're locked into only special summoning Aesir monsters, and you can't normal summon a set for the rest of the turn. Your opponent cannot target the monster this card points to with card effects, or target Guildford for attacks. To print an insane card like this for an archetype proves how unplayable Nordics were before making this card. To be able to have a card that pulls whatever materials you need to build your board directly from your deck is one of the most frowned upon mechanics in the game, as cards like these either get limited or straight out banned. For a deck to have this effect on a Link 1, and hilariously, had the potential to pump out 3 monsters literally would likely mean the deck would be ridiculously good. Too bad the monsters they brought out were Nordic ones. With access to no other good cards, the deck lived and died by Guildford. Either you would get your one Nordic monster protected by Guildford, or a Guildford's effect would be negated by a hand trap, and you'd get scooped up worse than Loki did by Hulk and the Avengers. It also didn't change the fact that just having a Guildford plus a Nordic god end board didn't strike fear in any player's hearts. By 2018, non-targeting effects were taking the TCG by storm, making protection from Guildford not as powerful as it seemed. Let's not forget that the Nordic gods weren't all that great either. Their effects didn't have any impact as they were slow ignition effects that didn't do anything during your opponent's turn. So even with one of the strongest Link 1 monsters to be printed just for them, Nordics still weren't that good. At this point, it was just about having them be playable. They would get further support for their Link in Soul Fusion. Alvis of the Nordic Alfar was a level 4 dark monster that, when banished by a Nordic link, could send 1 Nordic monster you control and 2 Nordic monsters from your deck whose total levels equals 10 to the graveyard to special summon 1 Aesir monster from your extra deck. If an Aesir monster you possess is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card, you can banish this card from the graveyard to special summon an Aesir monster from your extra deck with a different name once per duel. Now you get a card that helps you successfully get a Nordic god on the field if used as the main monster for Guildford. It even grants a revival for the single summon Aesir monster, yet the issue lies here. Since Alvis summons a Nordic god with a card effect, the monsters summoned by Alvis can't be revived from the graveyard with its own effect or any other card effects. So it was a great backup plan if you can't bring out your Nordic gods through normal means. Our final batch of support for Nordic came in the TCG set Battle of Chaos, as Konami revealed 4 new cards for the archetype. The 2 monsters given were Nordic Beast Golem and Nordic Smith Ivaldi. Golem was their new level 3 tuner monster that can be treated as any Nordic tuner. If normal or special summon, you can target and special summon a Nordic monster from your hand. You can also target 1 Nordic monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Nordic Smith Ivaldi is a level 4 Earth Warrior monster that can be special summoned from your hand if you control another Nordic monster. If normal or specialed, you can add a Nordic relic card from your deck to your hand. For spells, they had Nordic Relic Hilskilof. A normal spell lets you special summon 1 Nordic monster from your deck, but restricts you to summoning Aesir monsters from the extra deck only while that monster is face up on the field. You can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Nordic card from your deck to your hand, then shuffle 1 card from your hand into your deck. However, this card can only be used once per turn and only once that turn. For traps, Nordic Relic Fallon was a continuous trap that lets you negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent currently controls if you control an Aesir monster. You can also tribute a face-up Nordic monster to target an Aesir monster from your graveyard and special summon it, and you can only use 1 of its effects per turn. There's not much you can ask for in a deck than monsters actually having synergy, which the Nordic archetype has been lacking ever since its release. Golem was an excellent target, whether in hand or being summoned off of Golveg's effect. Ivaldi fetched your newest trap from your deck or any other Nordic relic that you wanted on summon. Hilskilof floated a monster from your deck for free and was a search when banished. And Swallen was a negate that your deck was missing to have interactions on your opponent's turn, which let you have more pieces to your end board. Unfortunately, in 2022, that wasn't enough to stop anything in the current game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Have a high attack monster that your opponent couldn't target, and a negate is simply too easy for decks to play through. Most meta decks in 2022 had no problem breaking through that board. It was still an issue that 1 hand trap could end your turn as there was no protection for Guildford when using its effect, the most vulnerable card in your deck because it was your only good card. The deck also couldn't go second as it had little to no chance to break through boards with multiple negates or pops. Depending on 1 card in your entire extra deck to carry to victory is the epitome of a fragile deck that wouldn't be able to compete on any level. If it gives you joy, or if you need some copium, the deck did surprisingly make a top 8 at WCQ in Ottawa in June 2022. The deck leaned heavily on the Adventure package for card advantage and a negate in Griffin Rider, and a Magician's package to fetch your alfars and set up your combos. Could it have been pure luck? Did the Odin's Eye bless his draws? Who knows, but we can guarantee if you run Nordics in 2024, you're looking at a Viking's death in today's game. So with all that being said, it's safe to say the Nordics weren't given a good hand in the TCG. It's once again a case of quality over quantity, as the deck had a whole set dedicated to them, but almost every card gave them no shot at being a playable deck. Constant sub-archetypes clashed with each other, the lack of extenders to establish a board was desert dry, and to top off the ultimate smack to the face, your Nordic boss monsters had lackluster effects that didn't apply pressure to your opponent. Even by the time cards like Golem and Golem came out, the game had already surpassed these cards to make an impact on how Nordics could impact the meta due to the speed of the format and the countless interruptions being played. The deck couldn't operate without Golem, and if the card is stopped, so are you. So if you expect Nordics to play like the strong Norse legends they are, expect a more MCU/God of War accent out of your locals or any tournament. May the Nordics/Aesirs rest in Valhalla.